Sony booth, and we're here to talk about Twisted Metal. And this is kind of a new game that you were going to talk to us about, and kind of how it created its own genre.
This is the latest iteration in a long-running franchise. It's the longest-running franchise on PlayStation. So it started with Twisted Metal 1 on PlayStation 1, and this is the first time it's been on PlayStation 3.
Awesome. And was it an online multiplayer before this?
No, it was Twisted Metal Black Online, which was on PS2, but this is the first time it's been primarily multiplayer.
That's wonderful. And so you played the game a lot. So like kind of where you've been during all of E3?
Yeah, I've actually been up here demoing the game the entire show.
They've kept you cooped up here the whole time? Also, you had to spend a lot of time with the game. What is your favorite, kind of like your favorite part of it? What's your favorite thing to do in the game?
Right now, it's I really like Sweetbot. I like transforming and flying around and like being able to range that down below.
Wonderful. What kind of weapons do you get to use? Is there anything kind of unusual way to kill your opponent in this game versus most other games?
There's all kinds of crazy twisted weapons. There's a meat wagon that has a gurney with a guy strapped on top of dynamite that you can pilot. There's vermin, and you can fly it's got a sort of a mascot rocket on top of it that you can fly through the level and attack enemies from above.
Wow, that's crazy. So if you were to kill a zombie with any weapon, what would you use from the game?
I would use napalm because it kills the most.
You would kill the most at once?
Nice big splash damage.
Awesome. Cool.
Kill zombies.
What game are you most excited for here at E3 this year?
Twisted Metal, of course.
I'm with Drew, the producer of Twisted Metal. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
You know what? You guys took us just through an amazing demo walkthrough of Twisted Metal, and you guys are bringing it back like to the core gameplay, it seems, here this time around.
Absolutely. Twisted Metal's always been about difficulty. It's always been about playing with your friends, and we're going right back to that. We're going right back to what people love, but we're also trying to bring new people to the series as well.
Now, can you tell us a little about the campaign mode and what people can find in campaign mode this year?
Right. So what we're demoing here is our second boss in the game. We have a doll-faced boss. It's going to be one of those boss fights that's just going to take forever, but when you finish, it's going to feel so good.
Yeah, like playing through it, there's like 4 or 5 stages to having to beat her, and it's so cool. You actually turn into a bot in the game, which is like I was blown away by, and you're flying around. It's unbelievable, but I want to also get to multiplayer. Can you tell us a little bit about multiplayer and what people can expect to play?
Sort of a capture the flag game just on steroids. There's a lot of stuff to do, a lot of things to keep in your head, and there's going to be a lot of team mechanics that we don't even know about yet.
So this is something that you guys are just introducing today or this week at E3 is nuke mode. So that's awesome. It sounds incredible.
Right, yeah, we showed the press last year. It wasn't ready for prime time. We think we got it right now. It's gone over really well. I was talking to the guys in the booth earlier, and they said that yesterday people were yelling and screaming at each other, telling them to go here, do this, do that. It sounds like a fun time already. So just with the response that we've got so far, couldn't be any happier.
And now this time there's like factions, right, in the game. So if you're playing with Baby Doll, she has like an army surrounding her, and there was white limos and stuff. So what's with the factions, and how is that going to play into the storyline? Right,
so instead of just being everyone is the doll-faced character, everybody can't be the doll-faced character online. That wouldn't feel right. So instead of being a specific character, you're part of this group. So you can tell your buddies and your enemies apart because physically they're different. I mean, you look in the car and somebody looks like Grimm character with dreadlocks and the painted face, and then other people have the doll face with that classic iconic doll face and the leather suit. And then there's obviously the Sweet Tooth faction with Sweet Tooth and just like crazy clowns. I don't think I need to describe him. If you've gone to an E3 or played a video game, you know what Sweet Tooth looks like. If you've ever played a video game, you know who Sweet Tooth is. You should. One question I want to ask you is about the vehicles, because there's going to be some aerial vehicles, right, and like helicopters and stuff. And how's it going to affect the gameplay with the vehicle, with the airplanes and helicopters and stuff like that? Well, there's balancing in every game. We know we wanted to give the players something else, and giving them that 3 dimensions of flight capability. We figured out a lot of ways to balance that out, and it's going to be really fun for players. I think they're really going to get into it. It's not completely overpowering. I mean, it's not like you have this giant mech or this giant airplane that's just dropping bombs and nobody can shoot them. There's a lot of things that we have so that the players on the ground don't feel helpless.
When can I expect to get in my ice cream truck and start shooting missiles?
Twisted Metal's out October 4th.
October 4th, Twisted Metal. Thank you so much for your time, Drew. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Awesome.
We shall all rise up this very night and tear down your tower of sin!
So this is our first, this is actually kind of a high concept. Some of you guys that were at E3 or that have seen the game or known about the game, this will get into a little bit more of the details of that. And then we'll also talk about what we'll be playing today. Okay, so Twisted Metal. Twisted Metal is, as many of you know, the longest running franchise in PlayStation history. Eat, Sleep, Play, which is run by Scott Campbell and myself, as well as a number of members who were on the game from the very beginning, are working on the new title with Sony and Sony Santa Monica. This title, Twisted Metal PlayStation 3, really represents, I think, the fantasy that we had in our heads when we conceived the first game back in 1994. And I think for the first time we've really been able to achieve that vision. As you saw in the trailer a moment ago, October 4th, 2011 is when we launched the title. And today we're going to be showing you guys, just to get kind of you warmed up, is a level that you played at E3 with some new content. This is called Sun Springs, California. We're going to be doing a team deathmatch game in it. The level is, you know, everyday backyard. One of the big issues with Twisted Metal has always been, or one of the big things we wanted to do, is destruction in places that you can really relate to, that you could actually see on your morning commute. And so this level really reflects that with its movie theaters and grocery stores and whatnot. So team deathmatch is what we're playing. You'll see your score. You're always going to be green today. Your enemy's always going to be red. On the right side of the screen, it's a 10-minute game. And again, at the end of the game, we'll talk about the prizes as well. So we're doing team deathmatch to start off. Brand new vehicle that we've wanted in this game since the first Twisted Metal. We're premiering today. His name is Juggernaut. We're finally able to do him. It's a semi-truck, not just with the cab, but with the trailer as well. One of the most devastating vehicles in the game. You'll get to play him today. Now what I love about this guy is not just his special weapons that are pretty devastating. If you look on the side of his truck in a moment, he has these kind of giant metallic mines that bounce onto the road, very much like those railroad ties that you guys may have seen in the movie The Island back in the day. But he's also, you know, you get hit by one of these and you can outmaneuver him, but if you get hit, it's pretty much lights out for you, as we're about to see happen with this car here. But what I love about this vehicle, besides that special, is the driver can actually open the back of it up, very much like Spy Hunter or Knight Rider, and two of your teammates can drive into the back and man turrets. Now the top turret on the trailer has a 50 caliber gun that also has swarmer missiles, and so they both draw from the same ammo pool, and the player will have to sort of risk-reward decide which one he wants to use. The top gun is the most devastating turret in the game. The problem is it only has a range of about 230 degrees. So you'll see a lot today that the sort of the key word is teamwork in some of these modes. You really have to work with your driver to help line up the shots. If you and the driver can attack together and target someone together, you're pretty much an unstoppable force working together. And so I love this. Now what's cool about this is when you open the back door to let your buddies in, you're vulnerable. Every attack that goes into the back does 2 to 3 times the amount of damage. So you've got to be careful, because one good shot in there with the right weapon can take the vehicle out instantly. We're also letting players play Axel today for the first time. We've announced Axel the vehicle. In this current discussion with Axel, we're only speaking about Axel the vehicle, not Axel the man. In Twisted Metal, everybody can ride every vehicle, and so what we'll see is we see Sweet Tooth and Axel. We'll also see the other characters as well. We have the Preacher, we have Mr. Grimm, and we have Dollface. Now Axel's primary weapon, every vehicle has 2 specials. His primary special is what we're calling War Wheel, which, as you can see, kind of goes into this like violent Oreo cookie that allows you to basically crush over monster truck style anybody that you can get in your path. And that does, you know, probably 2 or 3 hits with that and the guy's dead. His secondary attack is less damaging but more effective for team modes. You can use it to clear out space for your teammates. It does lots of damage to the interactive environments, but it does not as much damage to the vehicles, but it knocks them off ledges and rooftops and things like that, and we'll show more of that in a moment.
PlayStation.
Hi everybody, Jeff Rubenstein from the PlayStation blog, here with Scott Campbell and David Jaffe from Eat, Sleep, Play. What have you all been up to over the past couple years? We had Twisted Metal Black Extra Twisted Edition, Calling All Cars, and then past couple years been largely quiet.
From the start of forming Eat, Sleep, Play, we kind of had our sights set on reinventing and doing a PlayStation 3 version of Twisted Metal.
I mean, a lot of the quiet was really just building the team and building the technology and just getting up to speed, really. How do you
take a franchise that's been around since the very beginning of PS1, and how do you kind of keep the essence and the core and the spirit of that game alive, but also bring it sort of to new fans who have never played a Twisted Metal, and how do you satisfy old school Twisted Metal fans who are now expecting more because, you know, games have moved on from where we started.
In my mind, there's something that this is what Twisted Metal means. What the old school people think Twisted Metal is. Do you feel constrained by that? Is there like a burden of that sort of canon, or do you feel that you can just go out and just totally blow it out and do something completely different?
A lot of the stuff that a lot of the gamers today say they want with that robust kind of Modern Warfare 2 inspired stuff, how do we kind of respond as creators to the stuff that we like, but still knowing what the audience is saying? If you look at sales that they like, we've upped the hit points on our cars, so you survive a little longer. And some guys come into the playtest and they love that. And some guys come into the playtest and they go, dude, I want to launch 3 missiles and kill the guy and move on. And for us, the great memories we have of Twisted Metal are those chases where I'm almost dead and I'm racing for the health and he's behind me kind of unloading missiles, and there's that relationship that formed. But when you talk about that kind of meta game, we're not still sure where we fall on that, are we?
What does the PS3 enable you to do?
Well, I think what it's done that we're excited about is literally bring the game to life. I mean, we've been able to pack it full of new features, more destructibility.
When we first envisioned the initial Twisted Metal, we're stuck in LAX traffic and we're having these kind of road rage fantasies about wouldn't it be great to kind of blast traffic with missile launchers and flamethrowers as you're racing down the 405 freeway. You look back at the PS1 games and you can't realize that fantasy. It's not a big deal from a standpoint of, wow, you've got gunners leaning out the windows with shotguns, but our initial vision was like an action movie with guys leaning out with sniper rifles and shotguns and missile launchers. Now we can afford just the animation and the space to have vehicles as characters, actual human characters as characters, and really bring that fantasy of auto-dueling and car combat to life. And the most important aspect is that everybody's got online now. It's right out of the box with the PlayStation 3, and so the whole design philosophy is designing this as sort of online, and split screen is key as well, but our online portion designed out of the box knowing that would be the majority of people experiencing this game. There's a lot of things that being on the PlayStation 3 kind of causes the formula of what a Twisted Metal is to shift. Twisted Metal is obviously so comic booky and over the top, tons of destructibility, lots of irreverence, but it's that kind of fun fantasy of like just gonna, you know, be rebellious and tear it up. I mean, the very first Twisted Metal that we made, we really were so influenced by the fighting games that were really popular at the time. So with us, it just kind of made sense to really kind of follow that through to the end. And we built our own tournament and said, let's kind of create a character who's running this whole, you know, circus, basically. And that's where we came up with Calypso. He had the ability to give any wish to the winner. So it wasn't so much money and power, it was anything that you can think of. But the vast majority of times, you know, he gives you exactly what you ask for, which because the kinds of people that would enter car combat competitions that would destroy kind of society are probably not the most stable individuals. What they ask for ends up kind of coming back and biting them in the butt. You know, Sweet Tooth in our fiction, he is kind of the most notorious, deadliest serial killer, boogeyman slasher to ever exist. And the only person who's ever escaped was this teenage girl who was the night he first killed. And he's entered Twisted Metal in hopes that when he wins, Calypso will basically allow him to find her and kill her. But as we learn about that, we tell the story about who he was before Sweet Tooth came to him and took him over and is using his body to do what Sweet Tooth needs to do. I'd love to think that if there were ever a dinner of the great horror icons and Freddy and Jason and Michael Myers and Candyman are sitting there, that I don't think he'd be able to sit at their table, but maybe the kids' table. Dollface is this woman called Krista Sparks, who is this up-and-coming supermodel. She's just extremely ambitious. She goes to such an extreme, she ends up getting sort of encased in this mask. And so she's basically at wit's end. She's like, I gotta get out of this mask, Calypso, you're the only one, because I've tried everything else. I've taken a shotgun, I've tried to shoot it off, I've tried to rip it off, I've tried to burn it off, and nothing is helping. So she enters Twisted Metal in hopes of continuing sort of her world domination as the world's best supermodel. And so it really is, it's about ambition gone off the deep end. Mr. Grimm's flaw is that he really can't let go of the past. He would travel around the country with his dad, who was this kind of, you know, semi-famous daredevil, like jumping 30 buses at the state fair and things like that. And so there's the story picks up where he basically gets into this, he watches his dad trying to do this world record leap over these buses and kind of smashes his head open on the side of one of the buses. And he watches, this little boy watches this happen to his father. You know, he's basically left to fend for himself in the world, and he kind of grows up into this, you know, real unsavory, you know, common street thug. So he kind of has this thought that says, well, you know, my life's been terrible, I have a death wish anyway, but if I can actually go back, if I can go back to that night and stop my dad from doing that jump, you know, maybe my life would be different. And his story is really about that desire and what happens, you know, if you win the game with him, sort of what happens when he gets that wish. Preacher's a really interesting character in that his whole thing is he's on to Calypso. He's got a sense that he thinks he knows who Calypso is, and he thinks he knows what Calypso's about. But ultimately, it really does come to a head between the two of them. All of the characters in Twisted Metal that are in this contest, I think when we wrote them, there was an intent to build, I think, sort of a very relatable human flaw into all of them. So whether it is Mr. Grimm's desire to cling to the past, Dollface, sort of her obsession with her looks and vanity or ambition, or even Sweet Tooth, who just sort of can't quite scratch that itch. At its core, that wish and that desire and that character, there's enough of a grounding in sort of real life that it connects with people.
PlayStation.
I think especially in America, you know, there's just that love of guns and cars. Everybody's had those fantasies of, you know, God, I wish I had a rocket launcher or flamethrower in my car. It's kind of the chocolate and peanut butter of the video game world, right? It's a fun fantasy. It's a fantasy that I've never outgrown. I'll be a 90-year-old man, you know, with my walker, like, cars with guns, that's the If we have an opportunity to actually express that fantasy for a new generation of players and for ourselves at a new level of technology, it's just, you can't pass that up. The idea behind the weapon design in Twisted was really to create a series of weapons that, you know, motivated different styles of play. And not only motivated certain kinds of play based on the weapons themselves, but based on the connection to the vehicle. So, you know, certainly we have weapons that are good for vehicles like Crimson Fury or Reaper or weaker armored vehicles, or even a heavy armored vehicle that's on its last legs and can't afford to kind of jump into the fray. So we've got great weapons that do a decent amount of damage from far away. We have a lot of risk and reward weapons that, you know, if you want to get really close to someone, run the risk of a huge ram, but you can do a lot of damage, or if you want to sort of try to charge your weapon up, you gotta kind of flirt with that edge of huge success or losing the weapon entirely. And then we also have just a lot of fire and forget weapons. The fire missile, homing missile. The stalker missile is actually a lot of fun because it's kind of a mix between a power missile and a homing missile. The more you charge it, the more homing that it has. For us, it's about allowing players, in terms of the cars they pick and the weapons that they like to use, really, you know, define their own play style. Scott and I, when we did the first remote bomb, we envisioned these moments of great setup, payoff traps. But in the context of the speed of the game and stuff, people didn't use them as often that way. And so you can take a remote bomb in the new Twisted Metal, and yeah, you can just launch it out the front of your car, and it'll stick onto a bad guy. So even that kind of sticky nature is new. But what I love about it now is that if you drop it in the environment, it'll do about 2 times the amount of damage if it's stuck in the environment than if it's stuck to a car. So a lot of players just stick it to a car, think it's a fun weapon, detonate it. But a good player takes that weapon, sticks it like, you know, around a corner. And you've set up an ambush, right? And you detonate that bomb at stage 2 that's stuck to the wall, and just watch them all, you know, burn is real satisfying. So that's not a new weapon in terms of it's called the remote bomb, but in terms of so many of our weapons, from specials to the alt specials to the actual pickups, just have been built now from the ground up to promote choices. We want the player to have that fun mental puzzle of, oh, I'm good at this game because I know the best time to use the right weapons, whether it's a pickup or whether it's a sidearm. What we love too is we've always had machine guns mounted to the front of the cars. But now as you rank up in the online game, you can unlock different sidearms. So it's the choice of what car do I want and what sidearm do I want to couple it with, and what primary versus secondary, when do I need to use it, in what scenario, in what level. Players will always have something that they can get better at and better at.
PlayStation.
I've always been a mechanics-based guy. I love gameplay, but in the last few years, that's really, I love great gameplay. I mean, everybody does, but I love the idea of how can we do that better. And in a game like Twisted Metal, from 2 on, we started seeing fans of the series that were really playing it like we wanted to some extent. We always thought of it as a fighting game in cars. But we, and we build stuff intentionally. But these fans, took that and found stuff, some stuff we intended, some stuff we never intended, and they really fell in love with that aspect of the game that we were in love with. So we brought more of it to black. And on this one, we were like, let's just fucking go all out. And the intention was to create, look, we know we're not going to sell Call of Duty numbers. We know we're not going to sell Uncharted 3 numbers when it comes to multiplayer. But what we want to do is be profitable and have a nice-sized hit. But the big fantasy is, we want to be one of these games like Tribes is for a lot of people, but still to this day, they'll say that is a great go-to multiplayer game. We want to create, whether it's free-for-all or team-based, and our game has both, just a deep, nutritious, gameplay, nutritious-filled, meaty motherfucker of a game that really respects gameplay. And when I say esport, I mean, it's like, we tried to balance the shit out of this game so that it really can be something that individuals and teams really feel it's like a sport. After the surface fantasy goes away, and the explosions and the action movie stunts and over-the-top, destruction goes away, we really want under the surface, we feel we have a very deep, deep game that we want players to play with not the seriousness, it's Twisted Metal, but this, with the gameplay, intensity, and passion of other great esports. So that was the intent. I mean, look, I'm not saying we want to go out and, I don't know where we want to go with it. The goal was to build a game that was respectful and capable of that kind of gameplay. I'm not saying that we actually want to build an esport that suddenly has licensed teams and all that. That'd be cool. But it was more, we want to build a game that is that kind of game. What the community does with it, hopefully, is cool stuff that reflects, hopefully, their passion. Nuke Mode is really the centerpiece of the team-based multiplayer. We have Team Last Man Standing Shared Lives, Team Hunted, Team Deathmatch. But Nuke is really a mode that really, the best teams are going to excel via tactics, resource management. You only have one Juggernaut, you only have 5 Talons. Class-based play where certain vehicles work well together, whether you're healing someone or transporting someone. Different vehicles launch the nuke missiles at different speeds, so you want to make sure you got like your ball runner that's the sacrificer that is protected, because the lighter cars, not in all cases, but in a lot of cases, they'll sacrifice the faction leader faster, but they'll die faster, so you want to make sure you surround those guys with defensive characters. And so yeah, Nuke is really the mode that best reflects that ambition to become kind of a sport, but it permeates through all 7 modes and all the different host settings in those modes. So this is our ultimate expression of Twisted Metal. It's the best we could do as designers, as programmers, as artists, as producers. It reflects, on the shallow end, the dream we had for it when we first created the high-level fantasy of just great car combat chaos in the 90s, and what it evolved into. And so it's the best game I've ever worked on, and I'm super proud of it. I don't know if fans are going to find it. I don't know if critics like yourself are going to see what we see in it, but I couldn't be more proud of the game and the team. And that's kind of like, if I never make another Twisted Metal or work with a team to make another Twisted, I'm happy. I think on some level it was us kind of responding to wanting to put a little more imagination back in sort of our world. I think there's so much realism in games today, which is wonderful. And I think certainly, we're not making a fantasy game. We don't have any magic. We don't have any supernatural elements. Everything is still metal and steel and oil and diesel fuel and all that. But I don't know. I mean, when we really looked back about revisiting and coming back home to Twisted Metal, we wanted to take the best of the next gen in terms of multiplayer and some class-based play and online, a lot more variety to our sort of campaign. But we did want to go back to the well of the first couple of Twisteds that had more imagination, and I don't think you see that as much in big retail games today. And it's very much about conceptual realism, and I think we just kind of wanted to open up a little bit of the fantastical. And so I think it's not that this is a mech game. Sweet Tooth can transform into a mech. You're fighting a mech, but everything else is still, it's pretty much, car-to-car, vehicle-to-vehicle, ground-based vehicle combat. But we just wanted to kind of get a little bit more imaginative, just to sort of we just thought it spoke to what the game needed to be at this day and age.
That's awesome. So are we seeing some single-player campaign? Is that what this part is?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got 3 core characters in the single player. It's actually single player, but multiplayer co-op, split screen, and online co-op as well. And the stories and the campaign is much more varied than it's ever been. So we've got every character has its own boss. Every character has some different levels as well as repeat levels, but even the repeat levels have totally different events. So you might be using this level for a boss level, but another character might have kind of a vehicle combat race scenario that's happening for their chapter and their event. And so it really is more about, this is the beginnings of us starting to unveil and show more of the campaign. And we just, I know a lot of fans out there have been like, I want my 16 or 12 humans and my 16 or 12 cars, and we get that. We get the nostalgic demand for that sort of fighting game structure, but at the same time, we were like, if you look back at those games that they're longing for, it was the exact same game. That's what I keep wanting fans to come to me at the show and explain that, because I know they've been very vocal. And I've been like, whenever I say, but look, you played Mr. Grimm, and it was the same. It was rinse, repeat, deathmatch, boss, rinse, repeat, final boss, and then a movie. And it was the same thing for every character. And it's like, I get that you like that, but this really is the most varied Twisted Metal campaign we've ever made. The stories are better. They're these really cool blend of live action and CG, almost like Watchmen or 300. And so I really hope once they actually get hands-on with the single player that they'll see that what they're getting is actually so much more varied and valued than what I think they're used to, and kind of going, oh, I want that.
Well, one of the first trailers that came out, showed Calypso, and it was something I thought was a very fascinating line that he said was, referring to the contestants, he said, their weakness is my strength.
Yes.
And I thought that was very interesting. I wanted to see what your take on that was. Like, can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, I can't go into the specific stories, but I will say that to me, the most interesting stories that we've ever done, that people always come back to us and say, oh, we love that in Twisted Metal, we know that there's a comic booky flavor and it's over the top and all that, but they really are still very human stories. I mean, people always say, oh, I love the Mr. Grimm story. I love the Axel story when he was going up against his dad, So the main stories in the new Twisted Metal really are about these very human flaws. I mean, Dollface's whole thing is about vanity and how it really kind of screws her in the end, Mr. Grimm's whole thing is about how he really can't let go of the past and move forward. And even though it's painted with this very over-the-top comic book brush, I think you have to have that core humanity that resonates, that really bring these characters to life.
I want to make sure we get a couple guys off Twitter. You guys are on Twitter right now asking questions. Let's do that now. What do we got, Jeff?
Well, we've got I'll talk into there. Hey, we're not... I'm a control freak, all right?
Go for it.
A great question, and also a number of comments. It happens to be a lot of people are saying they would love to see Kratos make an appearance. So not asking for a response per se, but let it be known the masses would love to see Kratos in some manner.
Well, let me respond to that.
Please.
May I? Well, I mean, here's the deal. I think we have, as an industry, we have to be careful because there absolutely is a time, and there are certain games where it's right to do those kind of cameos. I loved that we saw Kratos in Mortal Kombat. I loved he was in Soul Calibur. But I think those and people have been saying, hey, talk to Ed Boon, get Sweet Tooth in Mortal Kombat. And I think there are those franchises that can kind of support and that kind of weight. I think when you're trying to relaunch a franchise and sort of reestablish a universe for a whole, hopefully brand new group of fans, as well as pay respects to the fans that have been with you from the very beginning, I think you have to really sort of plant your flag and say, this is Twisted Metal, and it stands on its own. And obviously, if it grows and becomes as successful as we hope it will, there's always room for those sorts of things. But we don't want it to sort of become like Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein or Freddy versus Jason. You have to make sure your franchise is pure first, and then you can start having fun with it. And it's just we haven't been out for a new generation of gamers yet in order to sort of sell our vision of the Twisted Metal world. But eventually, I think it would be fun to do, but not right now.
Last time I talked to you, we were in LA, and I finally got hands-on with Twisted Metal. It was interesting because
this was that April 13th event?
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
What's interesting is I was a huge fan of the first two games and Black, and it was interesting to play this because it's similar to those games. It scratched the same itch, and yet there was a precision there. There was a tightness to the controls. You were able to. These cars have never felt like cars. They felt more like fighter jets, like you said before. Yep. And I thought it was really interesting, though. It plays a little bit more like a shooter in some ways.
It is a shooter.
Yeah.
I mean, it is. I mean, that is. You can go back. I remember standing there. You can go back to 1994, 93, where we're sitting in LAX traffic and conceiving this game. Scott Campbell, Kellen Hatch, Mike Yam, Alan Becker, myself, way back in the day when I had first started at Sony. And the whether you love it or hate the driving physics, that fate was sealed in 93, because ultimately we've tried every Twisted Metal we've ever made to make them drive. We have a great engine. We have a great physics team. We're using Havit. There's no reason in the world that these cars could not drive like more realistic cars, whether you're talking Burnout. Gran Turismo is probably no, but if you're talking Burnout or the new Need for Speed, we could absolutely do that. I mean, it would be our own version. Those teams are talented in their own right. I'm not saying we could do exactly what they do, but it really isn't. The visual of the cars is really the trappings. It's the fantasy. But the minute you make these actually drive like real cars, that's not what you would actually do in real car combat. Or, I mean, you would, but you'd be dead in a couple of seconds because you've got to reacquire. You've got to go from 0 to 60 in like half a second. Otherwise, trust me, we can tweak it right now. Actually, we can't because it's the E3 build, but we have the tuning build. And it's like 3 tunes. So we should do a vlog where I come on and show your audience, and I'll show you what it's like.
I'm going to hold you to that.
I'd love to. You tune this guy to have a real ice cream truck, or even a freaking Mustang acceleration, and you're dealing with a situation where he flips around to take a shot, he drops to 10 miles an hour, 5-0, and then to get back up to chase his buddy that he's just shot at, you're like, oh, come on, because they're not really cars. They're humans, they're fighter jets, they're really avatars for the shooting experience, and they just look like cars, and that's been a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing because the people who understand it love it, but the people who don't, they're like, these physics in Twisted Metal suck, and that's because, and I appreciate that, because that's because
but they
they're
feel
so
great.
tied
They feel
for
great.
this game.
Yes.
They do. I would agree.
They really feel great. And it was interesting, too, just little details, being able to look up, aim up, at helicopters, for instance. Like, helicopters are another new vehicle. That doesn't mean you're helpless on the ground by any stretch.
That's right.
You can look right up and shoot them right out of the sky with a power rocket.
And we're still trying, we're still doing tuning, so one of the things I really am hoping we can get, for example, is some of all the vehicles have specials, they all have access to all the power-ups, but what I really want to get in there, if we can, is let's say you take a vehicle like Axel, right, the two-tired guy. Well, unlike, say, Sweet Tooth that can fly up after the helicopter, or unlike Death Warrant that has weapons that can track up in his special, Axel really doesn't have an air-based special. So to me, I'm kind of like, well, what if we can make sure that whenever Axel, because whenever you freeze the helicopter, he drops to the ground really fast. So Axel is a great ramming vehicle, right? So if we say Axel can do 2.5x damage just to the helicopter, suddenly it becomes this great rock, paper, scissors scenario where Axel may not have an aerial weapon, but the freezes go up into the air. So if I shoot my EMP blast as Axel to the helicopter, he drops fast, I transform into sort of a war wheel, and suddenly my crush is 2x. I don't even need my air weapon for Axel, for the Talon, for the helicopter, because it's balanced in other ways. So again, that's why I'm so proud of the team and proud of this game, is that I get some people just see the surface, but this is the best design work I think that Scott, Kel, and I, the Eat, Sleep, Play guys, the Sony Santa Monica guys have ever done. Underneath the sequels and the years, and honestly the decades almost, there's still an essence of competition, vehicle combat, stunt driving, a shooter, it's not a racer. And this set in this comic book, Twisted Metal, almost like Twilight Zone meets Creepshow meets Freddy and Jason from slasher movies world, that heartbeat is as strong today as it ever was. And so when we call it Twisted Metal, it really is kind of like planting a flag in the ground and saying, you know, our heartbeat is still strong. Every time we start a Twisted Metal game, Scott and I are like, hey man, let's do realistic cars. And it's a disaster, mainly because, you know, this is more like fighter jets. So they happen to look like cars, but they're like fighter jets. You're doing a lot of jousting, and then when you're both on the offense, and then when you're on defense, you want to get the hell out of there really fast. We have a lot of new mechanics in the game that aren't on the modern driving controls, which will ship with the game as default. I'm stunned that people are actually playing, because what we have right now is classic controls, because as the guys who make Twisted Metal and who really are good at Twisted Metal, classic controls are the best. When we first had the Twisted Metal vision, it was imagining stepping into that fantasy. I want to be in a car chase, going down the freeway. I want semi-trucks flipping and crashing. I want to be in a helicopter with a sniper rifle and a bazooka shooting down, watching that semi-truck boom in the air as you race through the explosion. And so that's what we start with. Every iteration of hardware that we make a Twisted Metal on, we get to get closer and closer to that vision. And so helicopters really came from, ooh, we can do helicopters now on PS3 and integrate them into online. We can do semi-trucks that you can team up and drive into the backs of semi-trucks and man turrets. Oh my God. And then frankly, that's us being bad designers. Then we're like, we got to figure out how's that going to work. You are the car, like every Twisted Metal. You now see your driver more, you see your gunner a lot more. It's the driver and their gunner are basically the way that we show off the weapon articulations. So instead, we do have weapons that still come out of panels and things like that, but we also felt, you know, it's kind of fun and kind of cinematic to have a guy lean out the window of a sports car with a shotgun and do a drive-by. It just feels more relevant and cool and movie-like, and that was such an inspiration. There's these great movie moments in car chase movies. So that's what that is. It's not really a different mechanic, it's just a presentation thing. You do not have to play co-op. You do not have to work with a team. There are free-for-all modes, there are surface modes like straight-up deathmatch or even team deathmatch where you're like, dude, I don't want to coordinate, I don't like talking on the headset, I feel embarrassed, or I don't like headset games. Absolutely. So here's what we know, and here's what we're so excited about. Those players are served, and they're served whether you're talking split screen local on the couch or whether you're talking going out to the world and playing Twisted Metal. But we also do have those modes that are deep and rich and team-based to guarantee that players who, like me, want that as well as the free-for-all stuff. We have all of them covered, so it's just awesome. I love this world. I love Sweet Tooth and this dark world, and I think the movies are coming out so cool. I was so worried about how they would come out, and as I see them coming to life, I'm like, I want people to fall in love with this world as much as we are, as in this dark, twisted comic book weird world. On the gameplay side though, Twisted Metal is a fighting game. It's a fighting game meets a shooter. It's Mortal Kombat, it's Street Fighter 4 just as much as it's Mario Kart Battle Mode. And I want people to basically discover what we already know and that hardcore Twisted Metal fans have known for a long time, that is, this is a great surface game, it's a great party game, it's a great pick up and play game, but there's a lot of layers and a lot of depth and levels underneath that pick up and play that really, to us, puts this in the same league as those great classic multiplayer games that really build a community for years and years and years out.